When veterinary technician Mira Lane encounters an injured horse on a rainy night, she has no idea how this chance meeting will change her life forever. What begins as a simple act of kindness leads her into the mysterious world of Elias Ward, a reclusive man haunted by his brother's death. As secrets from the past and threats from the present emerge, Mira must decide who to trust and what she truly wants. Join us on this journey of healing, love, and second chances. Before we begin this story, comment below where you're watching from. The rain pounded against Mira Lane's windshield as she drove home from the veterinary clinic. It had been a long day dealing with sick pets and worried owners. At 27, Mira had already seen more animal suffering than most people see in a lifetime. But that's what made her good at her job. She cared deeply and never gave up. Her wipers struggled to keep up with the downpour. The country road stretched ahead, dark and slick. Mira squinted, trying to make out the familiar landmarks that would tell her she was getting close to home. Something caught her eye through the curtain of rain, a large shape moving by the roadside. Mira slowed her truck, peering into the darkness. "What in the world?" she muttered, leaning forward. There, standing beside a broken section of fence, was a horse. Its coat was caked with mud, and it was clearly favoring one leg. The poor animal was soaked to the bone, shivering in the cold rain. Without a second thought, Mira pulled over and turned on her hazard lights. She grabbed her rain jacket from the passenger seat and stepped out into the storm. The rain immediately soaked through her clothes, but she hardly noticed. "Hey there," she called softly, approaching the horse with slow, careful steps. "It's okay, I'm not going to hurt you." The horse snorted nervously, eyes wide with fear. Mira noticed a nasty cut on its front leg and several smaller wounds on its flanks. Something had spooked this animal badly. "You poor thing," she said, reaching out her hand. "Let me help you." It took nearly an hour of gentle coaxing, but Mira finally managed to get the frightened horse to follow her to her truck. Luckily, she always kept a trailer hitched to her vehicle for animal emergencies. Her hands were scratched, and her clothes were plastered to her skin, but none of that mattered. Once the horse was safely loaded, Mira pulled out her phone and called the only person she knew who could help. "Aunt Martha, it's Mira. I found a horse on Ridgeway Road. It's hurt. I'm bringing it to your place." Aunt Martha's barn was only 15 minutes away. The older woman was waiting at the entrance when Mira arrived, a worried frown on her weathered face. "Land's sakes, girl, you're soaked through," Martha exclaimed, helping Mira guide the horse into an empty stall. "Where did you find this poor creature?" "By the broken fence near Miller's Creek," Mira explained, grabbing towels to dry the animal. "No tag, no brand, nothing to identify who it belongs to," Martha clicked her tongue. "That's near the Ward property. Could be one of Elias Ward's horses." Mira paused. "Elias Ward? The recluse who lives in that big house up in the hills?" "The very same. Been a hermit since his brother died 3 years ago. Tragic accident, that was." Martha shook her head. "Used to see him in town now and then, but these days, nothing." Mira had heard rumors about Elias Ward. Some said he was bitter and angry. Others claimed he was simply heartbroken. Either way, he had withdrawn from the world and no one really knew what went on beyond the gates of his sprawling estate. "I'll call the Ward place in the morning," Martha said. "For now, let's get this horse taken care of." Mira worked through the night, cleaning wounds and applying ointment. She set up a makeshift bed of blankets in the corner of the stall and monitored the horse's condition every hour. By morning, the animal seemed calmer, even nuzzling Mira's hand when she offered it an apple. "You're a fighter, aren't you?" she whispered, stroking its mane. Martha appeared at the stall door. "I called the Ward place, left a message with the housekeeper. We'll see if he responds." 2 days passed. The horse grew stronger under Mira's care. She visited before and after her shifts at the clinic, growing more attached by the hour. She found herself telling the horse stories about her day, about her little sister Emma, whom she'd raised since their parents died, about her dreams of one day having her own animal sanctuary. On the 3rd day, Mira was brushing the horse's coat when she heard the sound of tires on gravel. She stepped out of the barn to see a black truck parked beside her own. A tall man climbed out, his face serious and unsmiling. Elias Ward was nothing like Mira had imagined. She'd pictured someone older, harsher, but the man walking toward her looked to be in his early 30s with dark hair and intense eyes that seemed to carry a weight she couldn't understand. "You found my horse," he said simply, stopping a few feet away. Mira wiped her hands on her jeans. "Yes. He was hurt and scared. I couldn't just leave him there." Elias nodded, his expression softening slightly. Most people would have called animal control and been done with it. "I'm not most people," Mira replied. "I'm a vet tech. Helping animals is what I do." For a long moment, Elias just looked at her, as if trying to solve a puzzle. Then he said something that caught Mira completely off guard. "You brought him home. No one's ever done that for me." The words hung in the air between them, loaded with a meaning Mira couldn't quite grasp. There was gratitude in his voice, but also something else. Wonder, perhaps, or surprise. "Would you like to see him?" she asked, breaking the silence. Elias followed her into the barn. The moment the horse saw him, it nickered softly and moved toward the stall door. "Hey, Shadow," Elias murmured, reaching out to touch the horse's nose. "You gave us quite a scare." "Shadow," Mira repeated. "That's his name." Elias nodded. "My brother named him. Said he was black as a shadow, quick as one, too." The mention of his brother seemed to bring a cloud over Elias's face. He fell silent, running his hand along Shadow's neck. "I've been cleaning his wounds twice a day," Mira explained. "The cut on his leg was deep, but it's healing well. No signs of infection." "Thank you," Elias said quietly. "I'll arrange for him to be transported back to the ranch today." Mira bit her lip. "Actually, I think he should stay put for a few more days. Moving him too soon might reopen the wounds." Elias looked at her with surprise. "You want to keep caring for him?" "I'd like to make sure he heals properly, yes." A faint smile touched Elias's lips. "Probably the first one in a long time, Mira." "Thought?" "I have a better idea," he said. "Come to the ranch. Shadow should be in his own stable, but you can continue his treatment there." Mira hesitated. "I don't know." "Please," Elias added, the word sounding unfamiliar on his tongue. It would mean a lot, to Shadow and to me. How could she refuse such a request? Besides, she wanted to make sure Shadow made a full recovery. "All right," she agreed. "I can come by after my shifts at the clinic." The next morning, Mira drove through the imposing gates of the Ward estate. The main house loomed in the distance, grand, but somehow lonely against the backdrop of rolling hills. Elias was waiting for her at the stables, a large, well-maintained building that clearly housed several horses. "Shadow's in here," he said, leading her inside. The stables were immaculate, with spacious stalls and top-of-the-line equipment. Shadow had been settled in the largest stall, fresh hay covering the ground. "This is quite a setup," Mira commented, setting down her medical bag. "My brother was passionate about horses," Elias explained. "He built this place, brought in the best trainers." There it was again, that shadow passing over his face at the mention of his brother. Over the next few days, a routine developed. Mira would arrive in the early morning before her shift or in the evening after work. She would treat Shadow's wounds while Elias watched quietly, occasionally asking questions about her methods or offering to help. Slowly, he began to open up. He told her about the other horses on the property, about the land that had been in, his family for generations. He was a good listener too, showing genuine interest when Mira talked about her work at the clinic or her plans for the future. One evening, as the sun was setting over the hills, Elias suggested they take a walk. "Shadow's doing well enough for a short outing," he said. "The fresh air might do him good." They led the horse out into a small paddock, watching as he tentatively tested his injured leg. "You're good with him," Elias observed. "He trusts you." "Animals know when you care," Mira replied simply. Elias looked at her thoughtfully. "It's been a long time since anyone new has been on this property." "Why did you let me come?" Mira asked, curiosity getting the better of her. "Because you cared enough to stop in the rain for a stray horse," he said. "Because you didn't have to, but you did." As they walked back to the stables, their shoulders occasionally brushing, Mira felt an unexpected warmth in her chest. There was something about Elias Ward, beneath the quiet exterior and guarded expressions, that drew her in. Little did she know that just as she was beginning to see past his walls, Someone from her past was about to reappear and threaten everything she held dear. Back in town, a red sports car pulled up outside the veterinary clinic. A man stepped out, adjusting his designer sunglasses. "Mira Lane," he muttered to himself with a smirk. "Time to pick up where we left off." Inside the car, he glanced at a folder containing pictures of Mira with her sister Emma, newspaper clippings about Elias Ward's reclusive life, and details of a horse named Shadow that once belonged to a young man who died too soon. The next morning, Mira arrived at the clinic to find a familiar face waiting by the entrance. Her heart dropped to her stomach. "Hello, Mira," said the man, flashing the charming smile that had once made her weak in the knees. "Miss me?" "Rick," she said coldly. "What are you doing here?" Rick Palmer leaned against the wall, looking as handsome and careless as the day he'd walked out of her life 2 years ago. His dark blonde hair was perfectly styled, and his expensive clothes shouted success, though Mira knew better than most how deceptive appearances could be. "Is that any way to greet an old friend?" he asked, reaching for her. Mira stepped back. "We're not friends, and you didn't answer my question." Rick's smile never faltered. "I'm back in town for a while. Thought I'd look up my favorite girl." "I'm not your girl," Mira said firmly. "Not anymore." Before Rick could respond, Mira's co-worker Beth opened the clinic door. "Mira, Dr. Collins needs help with the Henderson's retriever." Grateful for the interruption, Mira brushed past Rick. "I have to work." "I'll wait," he called after her. "We have a lot to catch up on." All day, Rick's surprise appearance nagged at Mira. She hadn't thought about him in months, had finally stopped feeling the sting of betrayal. Rick had been a horse trainer, charming, talented, and utterly unreliable. He'd swept into town, wooed Mira with grand promises, then disappeared one night, leaving behind unpaid bills and several neglected horses in his care. Mira had spent weeks nursing those animals back to health, all while trying to mend her own broken heart. By the time her shift ended, Rick was gone, but a business card with his number was tucked under her windshield wiper. Mira crumpled it and tossed it away. She drove to the Ward estate, her mind still troubled. Elias was waiting for her at the stables, and one look at her face told him something was wrong. "Bad day?" he asked quietly. Mira hesitated. She hardly knew this man, yet somehow she felt she could trust him. "Someone from my past showed up unexpectedly, someone I never wanted to see again." Elias nodded, not pressing for details. The past has a way of doing that. They worked side by side, tending to Shadow's wounds. The horse was healing well, already more spirited and eager to move around. "He looks good," Mira commented, stroking Shadow's neck. "Another week, and he should be ready for light exercise." Elias watched her with Shadow, a thoughtful expression on his face. "You really love what you do, don't you?" "Animals are honest," Mira replied. "They don't pretend to be something they're not." "Unlike people," Elias added softly. Their eyes met, a moment of understanding passing between them. For the first time, Mira saw a glimpse of the pain Elias carried, the grief that had driven him into isolation. "Would you like to stay for dinner?" he asked suddenly, surprising them both. Mira smiled. "I'd like that." The main house was as impressive inside as it was outside. High ceilings, expensive furniture, and large windows overlooking the hillside. But despite its grandeur, it felt empty somehow. Unlived in. Over a simple meal prepared by Elias himself, "The housekeeper only comes 3 days a week," he explained. Mira learned more about him. He ran the family business from home, rarely venturing into town. The property was self-sufficient, with its own generators and water supply. "It must get lonely," Mira observed. Elias shrugged. "I prefer it this way. People ask too many questions." "About your brother?" Mira ventured carefully. Elias's face tightened, but he didn't shut down as she expected. "Yes, about Jackson, about the accident." "I'm sorry," Mira said. "I shouldn't have—" "No, it's okay," Elias interrupted. "It's been 3 years. I should be able to talk about him by now." He took a deep breath. "Jackson was wild, always looking for the next thrill. He loved life in a way I never did, intensely, without reservations. And Shadow was his horse," Mira guessed. Elias nodded. Jackson trained him personally. They were inseparable. His voice grew quieter. The night of the accident, I told him not to take Shadow out. There was a storm coming. But Jackson never listened to warnings. The pain in Elias's voice was raw. However, after all this time, Mira reached across the table and placed her hand over his. It wasn't your fault. Elias looked at her hand on his, then up at her face. Wasn't it? I was the older brother. I was supposed to protect him. Later that evening, as Mira drove home, she couldn't stop thinking about Elias. The guilt he'd been carrying for years, the walls he'd built around himself. Somehow, in just a few days, he'd gone from being a stranger to someone she cared about. Her thoughts were interrupted when she pulled into her driveway and saw Rick's flashy car parked outside her modest house. Great, she muttered. Emma, her 17-year-old sister, was sitting on the porch with Rick, laughing at something he'd said. The sight made Mira's stomach clench. There she is, Rick said, standing up with that easy grin. I was just telling Emma about my new training center in Kentucky. It sounds amazing, Emma gushed. Rick says they train horses for the Derby. Mira forced a smile for her sister's benefit. Emma, could you give us a minute? Once Emma was inside, Mira turned on Rick. Stay away from my sister. Rick's smile dropped. Come on, Mira, I'm just being friendly. I know exactly what you're doing, she hissed. Whatever game you're playing, leave Emma out of it. Rick's expression hardened. I came back for you, Mira. I made mistakes before, I know that. But I've changed. I've got money now, connections. I can give you and Emma the life you deserve. We're doing just fine without you, Mira said firmly. Rick stepped closer. Are you? Working double shifts at that clinic, barely making ends meet? His voice turned silky. I heard you've been spending time up at the Ward place. Is that your new plan? Catch yourself a rich recluse? The accusation stung. That's none of your business. Everything about you is my business, Rick said, his charming mask slipping to reveal something colder beneath. We're not done, you and I. Not by a long shot. After Rick finally left, Mira found Emma in the kitchen, eyes bright with excitement. Rick is so cool, she said. Did you know he's going to be working with champion racehorses? He said he might be able to get me a summer job at the training center. Mira's heart sank. Emma, you can't trust Rick. He's not who he pretends to be. Emma's face fell. You're just bitter because he broke up with you. That's not what happened, and you know it, Mira said, trying to keep her voice level. He abandoned his responsibilities. He left animals suffering. He said he had an emergency, Emma argued, and now he's back to make things right. Mira sighed. Emma had always been idealistic, quick to see the good in people. It was one of the things Mira loved most about her sister, but also what worried her most. Just promise me you'll be careful around him, Mira pleaded. The next day at the clinic, Mira was distracted. Dr. Collins noticed and asked if everything was all right. Just some personal stuff, Mira explained vaguely. Would this personal stuff have anything to do with Rick Palmer hanging around again? Dr. Collins asked, raising an eyebrow. Mira shouldn't have been surprised. In a small town like theirs, news traveled fast. Unfortunately, yes, Dr. Collins frowned. Be careful, Mira, that man left a trail of problems when he skipped town. I heard he's been calling himself a horse whisperer these days, charging people a fortune for his so-called expertise. The information didn't surprise Mira. Rick had always been good at reinventing himself, at finding new ways to charm people out of their money. That evening, when Mira arrived at the Ward estate, she found Elias in the paddock with Shadow. The horse was moving well, barely favoring his injured leg now. He's almost back to his old self, Elias said with obvious pride. Mira smiled, genuinely happy to see Shadow's progress. You should be able to ride him soon. I don't ride, Elias said abruptly. Jackson was the rider in the family. Mira watched him for a moment, then said gently, Shadow needs exercise. Regular riding. It's part of his recovery. I'll hire someone, Elias replied. I could do it, Mira offered. I used to ride a lot when I was younger. Elias seemed to consider this. All right, but be careful with him. He can be spirited. They spent the next hour walking Shadow around the property. The evening was beautiful, the setting sun casting long shadows across the rolling hills. I've always wondered what it would be like to live somewhere like this, Mira admitted. All this space, this freedom. It's not always the blessing it seems, Elias replied. Sometimes all this space just reminds me of how alone I am. The words hung between them, honest and vulnerable. When Mira looked at Elias, she saw not the wealthy recluse of town gossip, but a man who had lost his way in grief. "You're not alone right now," she said softly. Something shifted in Elias's eyes, a warmth that hadn't been there before. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch sending a shiver down her spine. The moment was interrupted by the sound of a car approaching. They turned to see a red sports car speeding up the driveway. "Who's that?" Elias asked, frowning. Mira's heart sank. "Rick Palmer, my ex." Rick stepped out of his car, taking in the scene before him with calculating eyes. "Well, isn't this cozy?" he called, walking toward them. "Mira didn't mention she was working for the famous Elias Ward." "What are you doing here, Rick?" Mira demanded. Rick ignored her, extending his hand to Elias. "Rick Palmer, professional horse trainer. Perhaps you've heard of me?" Elias didn't take the offered hand. "This is private property, Mr. Palmer." Rick's smile didn't waver. "Of course, my apologies for the intrusion. I just needed to speak with Mira about an important family matter." He looked at Shadow with obvious interest. "Beautiful animal, Arabian. Mix, thoroughbred," Elias corrected stiffly. "Ah, I see it now," Rick nodded. "I have quite an eye for bloodlines. In fact, I've just been hired to train for the Whitman stables. Perhaps you know them." Mira could see what Rick was doing, trying to establish credentials to worm his way in. "Rick, whatever you need to say to me can wait until tomorrow." "Actually, it can't," Rick said, his voice dropping any pretense of friendliness. "It's about Emma." At the mention of her sister, Mira's guard went up. "What about Emma?" "She's agreed to come work for me this summer," Rick announced. "Starting next week." "That's impossible," Mira objected. "She's still in school." "Online courses," Rick shrugged. "She can finish from Kentucky." Mira felt the ground shift beneath her feet. "She would never agree to that without talking to me first." "Why don't you ask her yourself?" Rick suggested, looking entirely too pleased. "She's very excited about the opportunity." As Mira stood there, caught between anger and disbelief, she didn't notice the way Elias was watching Rick, with growing recognition and suspicion in his eyes. The three of them stood in the fading light, the tensions of past and present converging in ways none of them could have predicted. And Shadow, sensing the strain, pawed nervously at the ground, as if remembering another time when storm clouds gathered on the horizon. Mira stormed into her house, slamming the door behind her. Emma was sitting at the kitchen table, textbook spread open but clearly forgotten as she texted on her phone. "Is it true?" Mira demanded. "Are you planning to go to Kentucky with Rick?" Emma looked up, guilty surprise flashing across her face. "He told you?" "You're 17, Emma. You can't just drop out of school and move across the country with a man you barely know." "I'm not dropping out," Emma protested. "Rick said I can finish my courses online, and it's a real job, Mira. Working with racehorses." Mira took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. "Emma, listen to me. Rick isn't who you think he is. When he lived here before, he neglected the horses in his care. He left without paying his bills. He made mistakes," Emma interrupted. "He told me all about it. But he's changed, Mira. This is his chance to prove it, and it's my chance to do something exciting with my life." "And what about college? All those applications we filled out?" Emma looked down at her hands. "College can wait. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity." Mira felt a cold knot of fear in her stomach. "Did Rick tell you that?" "Why are you being so negative?" Emma asked, frustration edging her voice. "You're always talking about following your dreams, but when I want to follow mine, you try to stop me." "This isn't about dreams, Emma. It's about Rick using you to get to me." Emma's face hardened. "Not everything is about you, Mira. Rick sees potential in me. He believes in me. And I don't. You treat me like a child." The argument went around in circles, neither sister willing to back down. Finally, Emma stormed off to her room, leaving Mira alone with her fears. Something wasn't right. Rick's sudden Return his interest in Emma, his appearance at Elias's ranch, it all felt calculated. But what was his endgame? The next morning, Mira received a text from Elias. "Need to talk to you, important, come when you can." When she arrived at the ranch, Elias was pacing in the stables, his face set in grim lines. "I've been doing some checking on your friend Rick." "Palmer," he said without preamble. "He's not my friend," Mira corrected. "What did you find out?" "He worked for my brother briefly about 4 years ago," Elias revealed. "Jackson fired him for mistreating the horses." Mira wasn't surprised. "That sounds like Rick. There's more," Elias continued. "He's been asking questions around town. About me, about what happened to Jackson, about Shadow." A chill ran through Mira. "Why would he care about any of that?" "I don't know," Elias admitted. "But I don't like it." They moved to the paddock where Shadow was enjoying the morning sun. The horse trotted over when he saw them, nuzzling Mira's shoulder. "He's really taken to you," Elias observed with a small smile. "We've been through a lot together," Mira said, stroking Shadow's neck. Elias watched them for a moment, then took a deep breath. "There's something I haven't told you about the night Jackson died." Mira waited, sensing his struggle. Shadow was with him. Somehow, the horse found his way back to the stables alone. That's how we knew something was wrong. Elias's voice grew quieter. "If I'd gone looking for Jackson right away instead of waiting for the storm to pass, you might have saved him," Mira finished gently. Elias nodded, pain etched into every line of his face. "Or I might have died too. I'll never know." "Is that why you've shut yourself away? Because you can't forgive yourself?" Elias met her eyes. "Wouldn't you?" Mira thought about her own life, how she'd stepped up to raise Emma after their parents died, how she'd pushed aside her own dreams to provide stability for her sister. "I understand doing what you think is right, even when it's, hard. But living in the past doesn't help anyone, Elias, not you, not Jackson's memory. Until you showed up with Shadow, I thought that was all I deserved," Elias admitted. "To be alone with my guilt." His words touched something deep in Mira's heart. "That's not true. You deserve a second chance. We all do." The moment stretched. Between them, full of unspoken feelings. Then Elias did something that surprised them both. He leaned forward and kissed her, softly and hesitantly, as if remembering how, after a long time, when they pulled apart, Mira saw something new in his eyes, hope perhaps, or the beginning of it. "I should go," she said, suddenly shy. "I have the early shift tomorrow." Elias nodded but caught her hand as she turned to leave. "Mira, thank you for Shadow, for everything." Back at home, Mira found Emma in a better mood, willing to talk more reasonably about the Kentucky plan. "Rick says I can do a trial run," Emma explained. "Just a few weeks this summer. If I don't like it, I can come home." It sounded more reasonable, but Mira still had doubts. "And what about Rick? What does he get out of taking a high school student halfway across the country?" Emma rolled her eyes. "An assistant who works cheap." "I don't know, Mira. Why is it so hard to believe someone sees potential in me?" "It's not about you," Mira insisted. "It's about Rick. I don't trust him." "Well, I do," Emma said firmly. "And I'm going, even if it's just for the summer." Mira recognized the stubborn set of her sister's jaw, the same expression their mother used to get when her mind was made up. Fighting would only push Emma further away. "Fine," Mira conceded, "but I want all the details in writing. Where you'll be staying, what you'll be doing, everything." Emma beamed, throwing her arms around Mira. "Thank you. You won't regret this, I promise." But as Mira hugged her sister back, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was missing something important. The next week passed in a blur. Mira split her time between the clinic, home, and the Ward Ranch, where Shadow continued to improve and her relationship with Elias deepened. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. His childhood growing up with expectations, her struggles raising Emma, their shared love of animals. One evening, as they walked through the fields at sunset, Elias surprised her with a question. "Would you consider working here full-time as our veterinary specialist?" Mira stopped in her tracks. "What?" "I've been thinking about expanding," Elias explained. "Breeding horses again, like my father used to do, but I'd need someone I trust to oversee their care." "Elias, I don't know what to say." "Say yes," he urged, taking her hands in his. The pay would be better than at the clinic. You could have the cottage by the north paddock. Emma too, when she's home from school. Home. The word hung in the air, full of promise. Mira felt her heart quicken at the thought of waking up here every day, of building something with Elias. "Can I think about it?" she asked. Elias smiled. "Of course." The offer stayed with Mira all through the next day at the clinic. Better pay, work she loved, closeness to Elias. It seemed too good to be true. When she returned home that evening, her good mood vanished at the sight of Rick's car in the driveway. Inside, she found him sitting at her kitchen table, Emma nowhere in sight. "Where's my sister?" Mira demanded. "At a friend's house," Rick replied smoothly. "I wanted to talk to you alone." "We have nothing to talk about." Rick's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Oh, I think we do. About Elias Ward, for instance." "What about him? Did he tell you how his brother really died?" Rick asked, watching her closely. Mira frowned. "It was an accident. He was riding during a storm." Rick laughed, a cold sound without humor. "Is that what Elias says? That it was an accident?" "What? Are you implying?" Rick leaned forward. "I worked for the Wards, Mira. I saw how those brothers were with each other. Jackson was everything Elias wasn't. Charming, adventurous, the father's favorite. Elias resented him." "You're lying," Mira said, but doubt crept into her voice. "Ampi." Rick pulled out his phone, showing her a news article. "Read it. No body was ever found, just Shadow returning alone from the hills." "That doesn't prove anything." "Maybe not," Rick conceded. "But what about this?" He showed her another screen, a bank statement with a large payment from Elias Ward to Rick Palmer, dated shortly after Jackson's disappearance. "What is this?" Mira asked, her mouth suddenly dry. "Let's call it a severance package," Rick said, with a smirk. "Or hush money. Elias paid me to leave town and keep my mouth shut about what I saw that night." Mira shook her head, refusing to believe it. "If that were true, why would you come back now? Why risk it?" Rick's expression hardened. "Because I'm tired of running. Because I deserve more than what he gave me." He looked around the modest kitchen. "And because I still care about you, Mira. I don't want to see you get hurt." "By Elias? He's dangerous," Rick insisted. "Think about it. The reclusive lifestyle, the way he isolates himself. Why do you think no one has been allowed on that property for years?" Mira stood up, anger replacing her momentary doubt. "Get out, Rick. I don't believe you, and I don't want you in my house." Rick rose slowly, his eyes cold. "Fine. But ask yourself this. How convenient was it that you found Shadow that night? That you, of all people, brought him back to Elias. What are you talking about? He's been watching you, Mira, for months, waiting for the right moment to draw you in." "That's ridiculous," Mira scoffed. "Why would he do that?" "Because he needs someone to take the blame," Rick said quietly, "when the truth about Jackson finally comes out." After Rick left, Mira sat in the dark kitchen, his words echoing in her mind. It couldn't be true. Elias wasn't capable of hurting his brother, of orchestrating some elaborate scheme involving her. Was he? Doubts crept in like shadows. The coincidence of finding Shadow, Elias's immediate interest in her, the job offer that seemed too perfect. Her phone buzzed with a text from Elias. "Miss you. Come by tomorrow." Mira stared at the message, her heart and head at war. She needed to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The next day, she arrived at the Ward Ranch earlier than usual. She found Shadow in his stall, his wounds, now just fading scars. The horse nickered softly at her approach. "Hey boy," she whispered, stroking his mane. "What really happened that night? What did you see?" "He can't tell you," Elias's voice came from behind her. "But I can." Mira turned, startled. Elias stood in the stable doorway, his face somber. "Rick came to see me," he said. "He told me about your conversation." "Is it true?" Mira asked, her voice barely audible. "Did you pay him to leave town?" Elias's expression darkened. "Yes, but not for the reasons he told you." He stepped forward, reaching for her hand, but Mira backed away. "Then why?" "Because he was blackmailing me," Elias answered. "After Jackson's accident, Rick started spreading rumors that I'd had something to do with it, that it wasn't really an accident at all. And was it? Mira asked, hardly believing she was voicing the question. Pain flashed across Elias's face. How can you ask me that? Jackson was my brother. I loved him, despite our differences. Then why pay Rick? Why not just report the blackmail? Because I was afraid, Elias admitted. Afraid of what people would think, of the investigation dragging on, of never finding peace. Mira wanted to believe him. Everything in her heart told her Elias was genuine, that the connection between them was real. What about Shadow? She asked. Rick said you orchestrated our meeting somehow. Elias shook his head. Shadow got out during the storm. The stable boy left a gate unlatched. It was pure chance that you found him. And the job offer, was that real? Of course it was, Elias said, his voice softening. Mira, everything between us has been real. Before she could respond, her phone rang. Emma's name flashed on the screen. Emma? Mira answered, relief in her voice. Where are you? I was worried. She's with me. Rick's voice came through instead. And we're about to take a little trip. Mira's blood ran cold. What have you done? Let me talk to my sister. All in good time, Rick replied calmly. But first I need you to do something for me. What do you want? I want the truth about Jackson Ward, Rick said. And I think Shadow is the key to finding it. What does Shadow have to do with any of this? Mira demanded, her voice shaking. That horse was there the night Jackson disappeared, Rick replied. And I think he can lead us to what really happened. Elias grabbed the phone from Mira's hand. Palmer, this has gone far enough. Leave Emma out of this. Hello, Elias, Rick said coolly. Glad you could join the conversation. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to bring Shadow to Broken Ridge, where Jackson was last seen. You're going to come alone, except for Mira. And you're going to confess to what really happened. That night. There's nothing to confess, Elias insisted. It was an accident. Then you have nothing to worry about, Rick said. Broken Ridge, 1 hour, or I take Emma across state lines, and you'll never see her again. The line went dead. Mira snatched her phone back, panic rising in her throat. We have to call the police. No, Elias said firmly. Rick is unstable. If he sees police, there's no telling what he might do. But why is he doing this? What does he really want? Elias's face was grim. Money, probably. It's always been about money with him. So we pay him, Mira said desperately. Whatever he wants, if it means getting Emma back safely. Elias nodded. We'll do whatever it takes, but we need to play along at least until Emma is safe. Within minutes, they had Shadow loaded into Elias's trailer. As they drove toward Broken Ridge, Mira tried calling Emma's phone repeatedly, but it went straight to voicemail. I should never have let her near him, Mira said, fighting back tears. I knew what kind of man he was. This isn't your fault, Elias assured her. Rick has clearly been planning this for a long time. But why? What does he think happened to Jackson? Elias gripped the steering wheel tighter. Rick always had an overactive imagination. When Jackson disappeared, he started spreading rumors that I'd done something to my brother. And you paid him to stop. Yes, Elias admitted. It was weakness on my part. I was grieving, not thinking clearly. All I wanted was peace. Broken Ridge was a desolate spot, a steep cliff overlooking a ravine, accessible only by a narrow trail through dense woods. As they pulled up, Mira spotted Rick's red sports car parked near the trailhead. Where's Emma? She called out as soon as she stepped from the truck. Rick emerged from the trees, alone. She's safe, waiting in a location only I know. I want proof, Mira demanded. Let me talk to her. Rick pulled out his phone, dialed, and handed it to Mira. After a moment, Emma's voice came through. Mira, I'm okay, but I don't know where I am. Some kind of cabin. The door's locked from the outside. Hang tight, Em, Mira said, trying to sound calmer than she felt. I'm going to get you out of there. Rick took the phone back. Satisfied? Now unload the horse. Elias led Shadow from the trailer. The horse was nervous, sensing the tension in the air. What now, Palmer? Now we let Shadow lead the way, Rick said. If I'm right, he'll take us straight to the truth. This is ridiculous, Elias objected. What do you expect to find? Evidence, Rick replied. Something that proves what really happened to Jackson Ward. They followed the trail, Elias leading Shadow, Rick a few steps behind with his hand in his jacket pocket, a clear warning that he might be armed. "What's your endgame here, Rick?" Mira asked, trying to keep him talking. "Even if you find something, what good does it do you?" Rick's smile was cold. "Justice for Jackson, for one thing. And then there's the matter of the Ward fortune. Did Elias tell you how much he inherited when his brother was declared dead? Millions. Money that should have gone to Jackson's partners." "Jackson didn't have business partners," Elias said sharply. "No? Then what would you call the people who invested in his side projects, the ones you shut down after he disappeared?" Elias stopped walking. "Those projects were pipe dreams. Jackson was throwing money away on them." "Not according to the contracts he signed," Rick countered. "Contracts that promised returns, returns that never materialized because you took control of everything." Mira looked at Elias. "Is this true?" Before Elias could answer, Shadow suddenly grew agitated, pulling at the lead rope and whinnying loudly. The horse strained toward a narrow path branching off from the main trail. "He knows," Rick said, a triumphant gleam in his eye. "Let him go, Ward." Elias hesitated, then loosened his grip on the rope. Shadow immediately trotted down the side path, forcing the three of them to follow. The path descended steeply, winding through dense underbrush. After several minutes, they emerged into a small clearing. Shadow stopped at the edge of what appeared to be an old dry creek bed, pawing at the ground and nickering softly. "This is it," Rick declared. "This is where it happened." "Nothing happened here," Elias insisted, but his face had gone pale. Rick began kicking at the dirt and stones. "Help me dig," he ordered, "or you'll never see Emma again." Reluctantly, Mira and Elias began moving rocks and sifting through the dry soil. After several minutes, Mira's hand struck something solid. "There's something here," she called. Together they uncovered a metal box, rusted but intact. Rick snatched it up, his hands shaking with excitement as he forced the lock open. Inside were papers, contracts as Rick had claimed, along with a water-damaged journal. Rick flipped through the journal eagerly, then froze, his expression changing from triumph to confusion. "This isn't possible," he muttered. "This isn't what was supposed to be here." "What did you expect to find?" Elias asked quietly. "A confession. Evidence of murder." Rick ignored him, reading frantically through the journal pages. His face grew increasingly agitated. "No, no, no, this can't be right." "What does it say?" Mira demanded. Rick looked up, his eyes wild. "It says Jackson was planning to disappear, that he'd embezzled money from investors, money he lost in bad deals, that he was going to fake his own death during the storm and run." He turned to Elias, accusation in his voice. "You knew! You helped him!" "I knew nothing," Elias said firmly. "Not until after, when I found his notes. By then it was too late, he was already gone." "Then why pay me off? Why shut yourself away?" "Because I was ashamed," Elias admitted. "Ashamed that my brother would do something so dishonorable. Ashamed that I hadn't seen it coming, hadn't stopped him somehow." Mira looked between the two. Men, realization dawning. "The investors, that's what this is really about. You're not here for justice. You invested with Jackson, didn't you, Rick? That's why you came back. You thought Elias had the money." Rick's expression confirmed her guess. "Jackson promised returns of 10 to 1. I put in everything I had and borrowed more besides. When he disappeared, I was ruined." "So you blamed Elias," Mira continued. "You convinced yourself he'd done something to Jackson, that he had the money hidden away somewhere." "He has millions," Rick shouted, "while the rest of us got nothing." "I inherited my father's estate," Elias corrected. "The family business. Jackson's personal accounts were empty when he disappeared. Whatever he took from you and the others, he took with him." Rick seemed to deflate, the truth finally sinking in. "Then it was all for nothing. All these years, all this planning. Where's my sister, Rick?" Mira asked coldly. For a moment, Rick said nothing. Then he pulled out his phone. "The old Miller cabin. On the north side of the property. She's locked. In but unharmed." Elias immediately called his ranch manager, instructing him to go to the cabin and free Emma. As they stood in the clearing, the truth finally laid bare. Shadow approached Elias, nudging his arm gently. "He knew," Mira realized. "He brought us to the place where Jackson hid the evidence." Elias stroked the horse's mane. "Animals are smarter than we give them credit for. sometimes they're the only ones who see the truth clearly. Within the hour, Emma was safely reunited with Mira, shaken but unharmed. Rick was taken into custody by the local sheriff for kidnapping and extortion. 2 weeks later, Mira stood in the paddock at the Ward Ranch, watching Shadow trot around with renewed energy and spirit. The horse's wounds had healed completely, leaving only faint scars as reminders of that stormy night when everything began. "Penny for your thoughts?" Elias asked, coming to stand beside her. Mira smiled. "I was just thinking about how sometimes the things that seem broken find their way back to where they belong." "Like Shadow," Elias said. "Like all of us," Mira corrected. Since the confrontation at Broken Ridge, Elias had begun to change. He'd reopened parts of the estate that had been closed for years, hired new staff, even invited neighbors for a small gathering. The walls he'd built around himself were slowly coming down. "Have you thought more about my offer?" he asked. "About working here full-time?" "I have," Mira said, "and I've decided to accept on one condition. Name it. That you stop hiding from the world," she said softly. "That you let people in again, not just me, but others too." Elias took her hand, his eyes meeting hers. "I think I can manage that, as long as you're here to help me remember how." Emma, who had decided to stay in town and finish school properly, was already making plans to work at the ranch on weekends. The ordeal with Rick had shaken her, but also matured her in unexpected ways. The evening before Elias was scheduled to leave for an important land deal, his first business trip in years, he and Mira walked together through the moonlit fields. Shadow followed a few paces behind, no longer needing a lead rope to know where he belonged. "I never thought I'd find peace here again," Elias admitted. "After Jackson left, after everything that happened, this place felt like a prison." "And now?" Mira asked. "Now it feels like home again," he said, stopping to face her. "Because of you. Because you had the courage to reach out to a wounded soul, human or animal, and offer healing." "We healed each other," Mira said. "That's how it works." As they stood together under the stars, with Shadow grazing contentedly nearby, Mira realized that some storms bring destruction, while others wash away the past and clear the path for new beginnings. Elias wrapped his arms around her, his voice sincere against her ear. "Thank you for bringing him home that night, for bringing us both home." And Mira, her heart full, knew that she too had found her way home, to a place where broken things could be mended, where lost souls could be found, where love could grow, from the most unexpected beginnings. In the distance, storm clouds gathered on the horizon, but this time no one was afraid of the rain. The end.